Okay, what did I do?
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Henney with East Point Local. It's a newsletter that delivers important and interesting news coverage about East Point to your inbox. And we're going to get started with our event today. Welcome to the first episode of East Point Live. It's a virtual Q&A about issues of the city and its residents. And today we are exploring calls for racial equity and police reform and how East Point can address them. Joining me today is Mayor Deana Holiday Ingraham, Lacie Pierre of the East Point Step Up Coalition, and Richard Rose, president of the Atlanta NAACP. Let's see, I think we lost Richard, so give me a second.
I don't see.
We can hear you, Richard, I just can't see you.
Okay, so I'm going to go out and come back in, maybe. How about
Okay.
that? All right.
Give us just a second to get Richard back with us. All right, Richard, can you hear me?
I hear you fine. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get back to it. Also joining us is Mike Fleming, who is moderating our online chat. You'll see that over to the right of your screen. If you have any comments, you can drop those in there during the discussion. If you have any questions for our panelists, I'm still getting a lot of feedback. Let's see if we can fix that. Let's see. All right, how about that? Yeah. So I was saying, if you have any comments, you can drop those in the chat. And if you have any questions for our panelists, you can ask those in the feature at the bottom of the screen. And I think we have everyone muted just to make sure we're getting rid of the feedback. All right. So we'll just get started with the questions. So Mayor Ingraham, I wanted to pose the first question to you. You've raised the issue of racial equity, systemic racism, and the police department's use of force policies during at least 2 council meetings in June. So I wanted to see if you'd discuss what's happening with the city council on those issues.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us and being a part. Thanks, Matt, for this invite. And so a couple things I want to start off with. One being that, there's a lot of civil unrest in this country, and because it's been over 401 years since non-Black people have started calling out racism and saying racism is acknowledging systemic racism. And so there have been a number of protests in our city too that I'm aware of, and we are happy to see East Pointers being engaged. The one where Jamarian Robinson's mother participated, I just wanted to make clear, I received some emails regarding that incident and with about 13 officers that were involved, and none of those officers currently work for the city of East Point, nor were they working for the city of East Point on August 15, 2016, the date of the incident. And so none of East Point police officers were involved in the shooting of Jamarian Robinson. And I totally stand firm and committed with all who are calling for the end of police brutality and dismantling systemic racism. And so when I initially was on a webinar or the town hall that President Obama did regarding this quite soon after George Floyd's murder, and he asked for mayors across the country to pledged to do this use of force pledge and pledged to review our use of force policies, and as well as engage community, review them and report out and then make reforms. And so when I looked at the 8 that can't wait, which is a discussion that's been happening across this country, East Point Police, I believe it was September the 1st of 2016 was when our most recent use of force policy was revised. And looking at that policy, we had already adopted 6 of the 8 that can't wait in the city of East Point. It's my understanding we've always banned chokeholds, but they're definitely still banned in the city of East Point. We require de-escalation. We require warning before shooting. We have banned shooting at moving vehicles and also established a use of force continuum, and all force has to be reported. Use of force has to be reported within the city of East Point and our police department. And so that was, again, since September of 2016. The police chief is, of course, as we do in continuous improvement and trying to continue to make sure that we're doing all that we can to protect and serve our community, is reviewing the policy and has already informed me that they are working and has already have a draft to include the duty to intervene, which will be the 7th, 8th that can't wait, as well as exhausting all alternatives before shooting. And so when we talk about policing and the reforms that are being called for, or the national policies around use of force, you know, the city of East Point has been ahead of that, as well as in December 2019, our police chief approved the revised or updated 5-year crime plan, which is based off of the 6 pillars of the President Obama 21st Century Community Policing Report, which include building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education, and officer wellness and safety. And so, again, there's always room to grow. We've had conversations, of course, around the national narrative and, you know, the positions around whether or not the police department should be defunded. I'm totally committed to continuous improvement, reforming, and restructuring where need be, as well as we're looking at trying to extrapolate data on our non-violent and non-criminal calls that we get for 911 to be able to, you know, redirect and provide like a crisis response to that. And so what we do now when we receive calls around people who are mentally ill, homeless, experiencing homelessness, suicidal, or those who also may have some other non-policing experiences, that the police department tries to connect persons in need with services provided through Fulton County. I've spoken with the police chief. He's indicated that he is open and willing to consider and explore ways to potentially have non-policing staff like psychologists, social workers, helping with those types of calls. Right now, using the programs and supports by Fulton County. But if our data shows that we have a substantial number of those calls, being open and willing to do that as well. And then Mayor Motley Broom of College Park reached out to me a little while ago about this idea of potentially exploring a Tri-Cities approach to a crisis response team. And so, you know, we're definitely trying to make sure that we're continuing to evolve and be relevant to the needs of the community right now. And I think that's all I had on that one.
Thank you, Mayor. Lacie, you're one of the 3 founders of the East Point Step Up Coalition, which organized, the mayor sort of referenced it, organized the rally and march to City Hall on June 12th. Can you talk a little bit about what led to the coalition's formation?
Sure. I think what the 3 of us and what we've all recently experienced in this country are a series of uprisings, as our mayor discussed, to drive racial equity in this country, particularly for Black men, women, and children who are being hunted down by police and victims of systemic racism. So we wanted to capitalize on this opportunity and bring it home where it also matters to us most. We know that there's brutality in your large cities, and local government plays a large role in your experience as an American here. here. So what we wanted to do was provide an outlet for our residents who are also deeply passionate about this, and to make a statement to show that locally, East Point, we want to step up and we want to be proactive in our approach to ensure that egregious, heinous acts of brutality do not affect our residents here. And really one of our goals is to collaborate with our local leaders and with staff throughout the city to work to reimagine what our community looks like and to re-envision safety and to re-envision investments in people within the city of East Point. And out of that, we did start to form a coalition. It was really important that our march wasn't just a one and done, but that was a long-term solution to empower and inspire local residents to take action.
Great, thank you for that. And Richard, I wanted to ask you, you've been a civil rights activist for quite some time, been involved with the NAACP for quite a while as well. And you've also been involved in the ongoing Atlanta protests. Is the movement for racial equity and police reform in East Point, which is a city that's about 3/4 Black in terms of its population, is that different here than maybe in Atlanta or in other cities?
Sure, it's different from city to city. But most importantly, we find that it's different depending on the race of the police officer, him or herself. It's amazing, but the data tells us that it is rare for a Black police officer to shoot an unarmed citizen. And you know, the NAACP was founded in 1909. The focal points were equal justice, voting rights, education, and economic opportunity. And here we are 111 years later, we still have those as our focal points because we've not yet realized equity in those areas for people of color. So we have to, our position is we need to stop, understand that these systems have bias and discrimination baked into them. So we have to unravel those systems, restructure them from town to town, from city to city. And each one will be different. There will be no template. It's not like McDonald's, you know, a Big Mac is a Big Mac. But each city has its own makeup, its own leadership. And so some of the policies that are more humane and that recognize that inherent biases will be different in East Point versus Palmetto versus Alpharetta. But in terms of one America, we have to recognize that we have to change these. Now, what we advocate is a move toward public safety. Still, that involves law enforcement, but focus on public safety. Right now, our 911 system is threefold. If your house is on fire, you call 911, they send the fire department. If you're having a medical issue, they send the EMTs. But everything else, they send the police, an armed police, man or woman, you know, with a badge and a gun. So we have to understand there are so many other things that involve our community. As the mayor said, you know, mental illness. In DeKalb County a few years ago, somebody called the police and a naked man is walking down the street talking out of his head. But should have sent at least social workers or psychologists or even psychiatrists, but instead they sent one officer with a gun, and it resulted in the death of Anthony Hill. So, you know, it's disingenuous to blame that police officer only. We have to understand that the system is constructed unfairly, and so we have to deconstruct the system if we really want America to respond to at some point live up to its creed that was written over 200 years ago. Now, we have to understand that when it was written, it did not include people of color and did not even include women. But the writings were good, and we need to aspire to live up to the writings that all men and women are created equal, and endowed with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And Lacie, during the march on June 12th, the coalition had several demands that they made. Can you run through those and talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So one of our goals is to support the prosecution of the officers that were involved in the murder of Jamarion Robinson. Something else that we like to see is a robust hate crime ordinance within the city of East Point that also includes protection for LGBTQIA+ individuals. And we know that that has progressed at the state level. We want to make sure that we have one separately within our city in the event that things change at the state level. Really important to us is a path that disempowers and disarms the East Point Police. I'd like to commend our mayor for her leadership in starting to shift towards unarmed responses to nonviolent crimes. I think it's also important to note that the 8 can't wait. We do have issues with that because this is reformative in nature, and these reforms have been tested in cities where we still see police brutality popping up. So it's important that we understand really what we're trying to do in shifting the system level. And we really want to see a path toward disempowerment and reinvesting these dollars into communities, into people, into the root causes of crime. And those are our key things. And finally, which are also on track to do, is to continue down the path towards removing all Confederate monuments and any streets that have Confederate ties. Those street names tell individuals like me, a descendant of enslaved persons, that I'm not welcome in this community. And that's absolutely something that we want to drive. And I know that it's a priority of our mayor to make East Point a welcoming city. And we want to do that in parallel to make it a safe city too. One where we actually feel empowered. Thank you.
And Mayor Ingraham, I believe it's next week's work session. The council is going to continue its discussion of a hate crimes ordinance. I think that was started last month. And then I believe also that there'll be a review of the street names in the city to look at whether they have any ties to Confederate ties. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So the East Point Historical Society has graciously captured some work around our street names within the city and shared that with us to provide some historical perspective, as well as we've asked staff to, give us a list of all of the names in the street, names of our streets in the city, I should say. And so we're hopeful to be able to be looking at that on Monday as well. I know that several council members had already mentioned Forest, I think it's Forest Drive or Forest Avenue, which is downtown, connected to Nathan Forest. And so there have been previous conversations and previous, interest or desire by council members to even address some of those Confederate street names as well. And so, I think one of the great things that exists in the city of East Point is that the overwhelming majority of our council are committed to making sure that equity and inclusion is more than a cliche in this city. And during this time of really trying to dismantle systemic racism and all signs of that, or, things that are kind of, monuments or celebrations to that, we remain open and committed to. I will, you did mention that hate crime was a part of our draft anti-discrimination ordinance, which we passed on June 15th. We didn't want to have an ordinance that had civil and criminal. So the anti-discrimination ordinance is a civil ordinance. The hate crime, any legislation around that really is criminal in nature. So there was a need to make sure that we pulled it out for that reason, as well to kind of look at what was going to happen at the state, if anything was going to happen at the state, and whether or not there are any gaps. So, the state passed a hate crime legislation that is applicable in all 539, I think, or 49 cities in the state of Georgia. And so we'll be looking at that to see if there are any gaps within that legislation as we move forward with our discussions regarding potential local hate crime legislation. I will say, I noticed comments around that the 8 can't wait doesn't really address police brutality and the inappropriate use of force. I will say that in the city of East Point, based on the information and data that's been shared with me from 2010 to 2020, there were a total of 11 incidents that involved use of deadly force. There were no use of deadly force in 2012, 2013, 2015, and none in 2020 to date. Of those, two resulted in death and one resulted in a person being paralyzed. They all involved suspects who were either resisting arrest, or one was a drug raid, one was a situation where the suspect had a gun and engaged in a fight with the officer. So, and then there was one with less than lethal force, which was the use of a taser. And so, which also resulted in death. So out of, over a 10-year period, or 9.5-year period, there have only been a total of 12 of those cases. And I'm not trying to suggest that the number means anything other than sharing with you information around our data, so that people have an idea of those. And I can tell you that every case in the city of East Point where force is used, deadly force is used, or people are injured, there's bodily injury. Those are investigated by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So it's sent out to an outside agency who investigates that use of deadly force, sends its findings to the district attorney, and then the district attorney makes a decision about whether or not to prosecute and move forward. And of the ones, the 2011 situation, 2016, that resulted in death, they went through that process, and the officers were cleared. There was no prosecution.
Okay.
If I follow up on that, Matt, I'd love to just, I'm glad that we have a data-driven leader who's able to speak to the facts, which I think is so important. And I'm also glad that it seems like we have a culture that isn't exploited at this point in time. I think that it's still very necessary that we are proactive and that we are preventative in nature to ensure that at a future point in time, when leadership shifts and as culture change, that we don't have a system on which people and individuals in positions of power can exploit and continue to perpetuate the systemic racism and police brutality that we have in the country. And at this point might be performing better, and we want to make sure that our measures don't allow for things to shift.
And Mayor Ingraham, one of the things I think it came out of the discussion at the June 8th meeting and was going to carry over to your work session this Monday is the talk about the police department's use of force policy, and that there was going to be some component of that review that involves community engagement. Can you address that a little bit?
Yes, so policing, or operations, I should say, is by charter the responsibility of our city manager and our police chief over our department. And so since our last meeting, the city manager and police chief, the city manager indicated to me that he and the police chief will be talking about what that looks like moving forward, and what, as we look at reviewing the use of force policy, how the community engagement piece would look, what would that look like? And so the East Point Police Department has a citizens police academy that they offer twice a year, where citizens could participate and kind of get into understanding what policing is. And there are a number of other community initiatives that our police department does. And I think that speaks to not only the words in our policy around community policing and the fact that we have a 5-year crime plan that is based off the President Obama's 21st Century Community Policing Report, but that they are actually committed to the community, patrolling the community, introducing themselves to residents, being a part of the community, doing National Night Out, providing a summer camp for kids. So really I think it indicates that our police department is open. They go to neighborhood association meetings, share crime data, statistics, and also listen to concerns, and are always available. I know people email and call some of our officers, our majors and captains and police chiefs as well. And so there's definitely a willingness to be open and continue to have this community policing and community collective engagement as we kind of do policing in our city. I mean, safe communities is not just communities that solely rely on police. It is really working with the community through community policing to help ensure safety of our communities.
So I just wanted to make sure that I was clear. So there was a discussion last month about the council reviewing the policy, and then I think bringing a report to the community to get community feedback. So that has changed a little bit, or?
Well, so last month at the meeting, what I introduced was, I think I was on the town hall that President Obama had, like on that Thursday or Friday before that Monday meeting. So I brought forward what that use of force pledge entails, which is reviewing your use of force policy, engaging the community, creating a report on the findings, as well as reform, right? And so when we've looked at where we are, we know where we are regarding the 8 that can't wait, and there's processes and things that need to take place. And again, since the police chief is over policing, I'm leaving that up to them to share with us this month what that looks like what our review will look like locally. So we don't have those responses yet. That'll be shared at our July 13th meeting.
Okay. And Richard, I was going to ask you so the protests and marches have been going on in East Point and Atlanta for weeks, are demanding big changes, which once those changes start getting addressed by the political process, don't come very quickly. What do you tell folks as a way to keep their energy and enthusiasm for change active and energized while that sort of the political process takes over and change sort of comes probably more slowly than people would like?
Yeah, so sure. We got elections coming up, and the vote is our opportunity to participate in government directly by choosing the leaders. We cannot forget that. And I know, people been hemmed up for several months with the pandemic, so everything's on edge. But we got to reach out and understand that peaceful protests, nonviolence is what works. All violence comes in, then there's another reaction. First law of physics says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, but for people it's not necessarily equal and it's not necessarily opposite, but there is a reaction. So we hope people will channel their energies to be more informed about who these candidates are, to make sure that we go and vote. Not only this runoff, of course, in the fall election, but be more informed and reach out to your local political leaders, your mayor, your city council, your county commission, your governor, your state legislators to express your concerns about whatever is going on. If you don't, if they don't know what the community wants, then they are free to make up their own rules as they go. There are a lot of things that affect local communities that come down from the state. For example, Georgia has a horrendous, we think, citizens arrest statute. And the first question is, well, who in fact is a citizen? Well, we know that people of color have not been accorded the rights and privileges of citizenship. So one person's citizen's arrest is another person's assault and kidnapping. So there are a lot of things from the state standpoint. We got a stand your ground law that seemed to work only on one side. And the other big thing is that we got to understand, no matter how good a police force is, crime is related to poverty and economics. When we have economic downturn, we have more crime. We got to be serious. And in areas where the poverty level is lower, is highest, we have more crime. So we got to be serious. The Atlanta region has the highest income disparity rate in the country. And that's because of systemic, long-term, generational oppression. The objectives of oppression are simple: deprivation, take away your resources, keep you from obtaining resources, and then degradation. Take away your pride, take away your self-worth. And unfortunately, that has worked in America. And so we at the NAACP continue to advocate to, let's be honest about what these things, and we, this Atlanta branch, we have kind of led the fight against Confederate Monument. We started 5 years ago, and we attacked the biggest bullet, which is Stone Mountain. We are so gratified and so inspired to see other monuments being moved. But until America finally repudiates racism with all of its symbols, we will not be satisfied. We will not stop working.
And have any of the three of you found other Confederate symbols at East Point? I think, Mayor, in a past meeting, you've mentioned one that's on Main Street that is a marker for, I think it's Jefferson Davis Highway. Are there others that you've come across, either you or Lacie, that you come across in East Point?
Not to my knowledge, as it relates to that one. That stone is on private property, and the property owner and business owner is definitely willing to remove the sign. So he's considering whether or not he wants to just demolish it and destroy it, or actually convert it into some type of art, public art, such that that is erased, so to speak, but there's still a purpose for that. And so it's private. We've talked about it. I told him I trust his judgment, but I mean, he was immediately ready to demolish it within a week or two, just trying to get quotes. And then he started thinking about whether or not maybe he could transform it into some level of public art. And so I'm not sure what decision he's going to ultimately come up with, but it will remove that monument from our downtown, either totally physically or be transformed into public art.
Okay. And Lacie, has the coalition found any others that you're concerned about?
No, not at this time. We've not found any more within our city. There is a database that shows a lot of that in the South, and we're happy to share that and to look and work collaboratively with our leaders to help identify, remove, and rename streets as well.
Okay. And I think Richard touched on this a little bit in terms of people getting involved. So I wanted to ask the mayor and Lacie, what can East Point residents do to get involved in terms of the calls for racial equity and police reform?
I think understanding that I'm just a resident myself, we have power. And I think that we are, at this point especially, empowered to take control or to take ownership of how we want to live and to hold our leaders accountable. I think anybody who's open can absolutely start their own coalition or join with us. Attending council meetings, developing relationships with your elected officials is also a great way to start. And I think just to be empowered and understand that our role is to be represented by those in power, and or positions of power ourselves, I think is also something that we can do. It's also very important to educate yourself along this journey. I'm still learning as an organizer myself. I think it's really important that we come with education and with data and the facts to support our positions so that we can have healthy dialogues.
So I would say I have a dream that one day all East Pointers will be engaged residents, meaning to what Lacie just mentioned, understanding that truly government is of the people, for the people, by the people, and that the people have the power, right? And that power is to, yes, vote for elected officials who represent your interest and whatever that might be. And hopefully it is a people-focused interest, and one that is undergirded in putting people first in these roles. I mean, we deal with a lot of different issues, but there's a balancing that happens, but we have to prioritize people more in the interest of our people and the quality of life. And we are able to do that if we have engaged residents who let us know and who are informed, and who either show up or participate in a number of different ways. There's a survey out right now. We are working with Partnership for Civic Equity around moving forward and creating an equitable growth and inclusion plan in the city. And the survey really touches on a number of areas within our community so that we can hear from our residents, their perspective. So I encourage each of you to please complete that. The link is on our website. It's been mailed out a number of different places. It's also been sent out on social media. So please complete it. Our target goal is July 24th. But hopefully we'll have a responsive number by then. But if not, please, we'll continue to keep it open. There will also be a number of opportunities for the community to come together and have community talks around what equity is and what equity and inclusion is, looking at a Citizens Leaders Academy or around kind of understanding this work and providing input and feedback as we move forward. It's really critical that people are engaged and that you find your passion and do it. So volunteering in the point is an initiative I started because people don't always say, Mayor, let me know what I can do to help out. I'm here for you. And then the connections weren't made. And so volunteering in the point, it's on our website. There's a link to a brief survey, Survey Monkey, but really to just gather what your interests are. There are a number of different interest areas listed, but also a place for others, because I really believe that when anyone who volunteers is VIP, right? So they're very important people, but it's volunteering in the point. And then I don't care if it's 30 minutes one time a year. If all 35,000 residents did 30 minutes one time a year, imagine that impact, right? So it's not the quantity of time, it's the quality of that time. But also, I believe that if every person taps into their passion and their interest and brings that to, the work that we're doing within the city of East Point, our city, I already believe there's no point like East Point, but we will continue to be able to say that because we will have a community where it's not just what we say, where we walk it like we talk it, where people actually feel included, where people feel like they're a part of what happens in our community. And so we're trying to make sure that we're including and prioritizing community engagement, community voice, and feedback in all that we do.
So I've got a couple of questions, several questions actually, I want to get to from folks in the chat. So the first one is, Mayor, you mentioned the community, the Citizen Police Academy, and that was actually something that I was in the most recent round before it was stopped because of the pandemic. I think we got maybe 4 weeks into it. Do you know when that's going to resume?
Yeah, so while we're under the state of emergency, it won't resume. I did speak with reach out to the chief on that, and he indicated that we won't have it while we're under the state of emergency. So no time certain yet, but it definitely will continue. And before I got elected to council, I participated in the East Point Citizens Academy. East Point Leaders Academy. I can't even remember the name of it, but it wasn't related to the police department. East Point Citizens Academy, that's what it's called. But it was a way for people to, citizens to go through that similar process. It was 10 weeks to learn about the East Point city government and, we heard from different department heads each meeting. It was a way for us to participate and be involved. So I raised that, I believe, either earlier this year or last year, to see if we could bring that back, and the city manager indicated that he would be looking to bring that back as well. He was thinking about the spring, and then of course COVID happened. But I'm looking forward to the East Point Citizens Academy coming back, because that is a way for people to be introduced and learn about government. But in the meantime, I do quarterly community conversations because I believe that it is important and powerful when people are knowledgeable and understand how things work and understand how to access information so that they can be empowered to make informed decisions for themselves and not potentially be manipulated by misinformation or, what people's opinions are. So our goal is to make sure information is readily available, accessible, and that people are able to be informed as they want to be and to be engaged residents.
There's another question from Naya in our chat, and they referenced said based on current events and restrictions regarding the pandemic, are there plans or ways for safe social gatherings to attempt to address some of these issues, racial stigma, equity, and other issues that we've talked about today. I know that the coalition had the march on June 12th, but are there other ways that can be done under the sort of the current restrictions? Lacie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, and I'd also love to hear from Richard too about what he's doing with the NAACP. I know our coalition, we've already kicked off, and we're standing up action teams. And what that looks like is leveraging a lot of Zoom to actually develop and co-create. So we're using the best digital tools to come up with action plans to progress our demands. And I think also something that's important for any organizing team is to build relationships. So that's also at the core of what we're doing. So in addition to doing coalition related work, we're building relationships because that's also at the core of the community. I think just like every organization, we're reacting to being in COVID. So definitely a lot of interfacing on these digital opportunities and where it makes sense and where it's safe now at this point in time, if it makes sense for us to get together, but doing so in very safe spaces with minimal people together. But we will not let COVID stop our progress.
Richard, any thoughts from you about that?
So yeah, just like everybody else, we're kind of restricted in what we've been able to do the last several months. All our face-to-face meetings have disappeared, but we produce documentation. Atlanta has a task force that's working now for its police force, and we've sent our document to them, which includes Obama's 21st century police policy. But also, one of the big things we say, we want police forces to really start from scratch and re-examine all police officers for psychological fitness and to institute regular examination of psychological fitness. And that's kind of one of the biggest things. And as much as possible, police, they ought to live in the communities that they serve. Sometimes it gets to be difficult, but we have a way of business and the industry has a way of figuring out how to make things happen if they want it to happen. So that's one of the things we think ought to happen. We have to be in partnership. So people can get on our mailing list. They can go to our website, naacpatlanta.org, click on subscribe, add to our mailing list. And when we do press conferences, press statements, or position papers, we distribute those not only to press outlets, but we distribute it to our members and interested parties. We'll continue to do that. We're always open to hear from people. We get probably 1,000 emails and calls a month. Anybody can be one of those 1,000. We even answer even the most profane contact messages that we get. So we're here for that. We got a great program manager who's also East Point City Council person. Karen Renee is our second vice president and runs our office. I'm the president, but she runs it.
And we're looking at ways to bring smaller groups of people together, social distancing. So the Juneteenth celebration that we had in person, but then broadcast it through Zoom and have ways to increase the number of people who can participate in the experience. So we had our first community conversation on racism and othering during the Juneteenth celebration. And so we were engaging in that in person, but we also had people on Zoom that we put in breakout rooms so that they can engage as well and still be a part of that process. So we're looking to continue those types of engagements and conversations around, community conversation on racism, othering, policing, because I really think it's critically important that we have a multicultural shared understanding of what systemic racism is and America's history, which includes all of those things that kind of have been left out. And then what is our path forward, right? And not making assumptions that, all Black people know all things about all Black issues or are committed to all Black issues, and that all white people are operating from white privilege. And, no, that is doing more of the same. we really have to deal with people individually. And, yes, assume goodwill and assume that everybody has the will to be open, to learn, to be re-educated about our history, about ourselves, about our community, and about our excellence, but also move forward. And so, I think it's important that government plays a role in that, because it's important to make sure that we're not just saying things, but we're actually doing it. So we're looking to continue to have those monthly. We've reached out to the Legacy Center, which is in East Point over by John D. Milner Park. And the philosophy behind the Legacy Center is Black Wall Street, like recreating Black Wall Street and the economic vitality and success that existed then. And so how can we incorporate, that venue and that asset that's in our city to help with maybe like movie screenings of Just Mercy or Black Wall Street, and then having conversations around that. So this work will continue moving forward, and we'll just ask that, as we provide these opportunities, it will be great to make sure that we have people who are a part of it, that it's a multicultural collaboration, and that we're not making assumptions about people, right? That we are dealing with people for who they are and continue to build and move forward.
Thank you, Mayor. And then there's one last question I want to get to from Niall in the chat. And they ask, are there specific, you mentioned the 5-year plan from the police department. The question is, are there specific plans for that 5-year plan to be completed in collaboration with the community? Or was that plan already, is it completed, or is it what?
So with any organization in any department, every department has to have a strategic plan about their work and how they're going to move forward. And so that plan is the police chief's strategic plan for policing for that department within the city. Again, it includes, one of the main pillars is community policing and engaging the community. And so it is a framework, but moving forward, continuing to have community policing not just be in theory. And I saw the comments, community policing is about police being a part of the community and not just policing the community, but being known as people in the community who are aid and support, listening to the community, engaging with the community. And so that is that part, that pillar where that work will definitely include community moving forward.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think we're about to bring our Q&A to a close. I wanted to thank everyone. Lacie, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
So I might be on mute. I think it would be great to have residents involved in the upfront of that strategy, and to understand and to also develop a strategy that actually puts into place measures to de-scope their influence. So how can we start working together to document a path towards implementing some of the items that the mayor has talked about for those unarmed instances or those nonviolent instances? How can we actually begin to institutionalize that into our city and move those resources over to, like Richard talked about, addressing the actual inequity from socioeconomic disenfranchisement? How can we actually start to address that will be important, and to start to de-scope and understand that there are other ways for us to live and to envision our community that is also safe, but also shows that we are committed to investing in people and providing programs to prevent youth and young adults from entering into what we now call criminal behavior. And I'm saying that because there's also opportunity to improve what we actually define as in this country.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to thank everyone for taking part today. It's been a great discussion. After the event, you'll get an email with a link to the video so you can replay it as well. And we'll have a survey in there so you can give us some feedback on how things went today and how we can improve future events. If you're not subscribed to East Point Local, there's a green button at the bottom of your screen, so you can do that. And a big thank you to Mayor Ingraham and Lacie and Richard for their time today. One last quick question to each of you. Where can people follow you or find out more about the organization or these issues? Lacie, did you want to take that first?
Sure. So if anybody is interested in learning more or engaging with East Point Step Up, you can follow us on all social media platforms at East Point Step Up. And then our email address is eastpointstepup@gmail.com. And it's totally citizen-led, citizen-run. It's decentralized. We have a lot of great leaders, and our goal is to inspire and develop leaders and to also educate ourselves and residents too. So anybody's welcome to join, and we're super excited about that we do have.
Richard, how about for you?
Sure. So, our website is naacpatlanta.org. You can follow us. We post stuff daily. You follow us on social media at NAACP Atlanta. Our phone number is 404-524-0580. Again, our focal points are voting rights, economic opportunity, education, and equal justice. Those were the first four. We've added housing, health, and environment. Everybody's welcome to join. We have, limited staff in our office now. We try to hold it down to about 4 people so they can be socially distanced within the office. And we are in the great city of East Point at 1147 Calhoun, right at the corner of Calhoun and Normanberry. We will continue to do the work. We don't have all the answers. If you got a suggestion, we'll take it.
And Mayor Ingram?
Yes, so the website is eastpointcity.org/mayor. My email address is mayor@eastpointcity.org. Phone number is 404-270-7091. And Facebook is Mayor Deana Holiday Ingraham. And then on Instagram and Twitter, it is @Deana Ingraham. And then I also have a YouTube channel, Mayor Deana Holiday Ingraham, and LinkedIn. So I'm pretty much on all social media platforms. I really need a lot of help sometimes to keep up with all of them, but definitely trying to stay connected and engaged. And by all means, email or call me. I again have a dream that one day every East Pointer will be an engaged resident and be a part of the work in this city to move us forward. Because while it's a representative government and you elect 9 people to represent this government, the real work and the real movement happens when we work collectively. And that is the city, staff, residents, organizations, all working together. And the best ideas don't necessarily just come from 9 people. They are in our community. And that's why our diversity, our multiculturalism is our strength, because we have so many people with so many different experiences and views and talents and skills. And I say you're all VIP in the great city of East Point. So thank you again, Matt, for being an amazing East Pointer, convening this, inviting us today, and to everyone who's participated and taken time to listen to this today.
Thank you. And thanks again to everyone. Stay safe. Wear your mask, especially in East Point now. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Right.